The Roman Empire, which we often think of as a symbol of greatness, countless triumphs, and endless hot summer days, actually hid much more severe and unexpected trials. We used to think of ancient Rome as a place where the year-round warmth and abundance reigned, where the eternal sun caressed the marble columns of the forums, and a light breeze from the Tyrrhenian Sea brought welcome coolness even in the hottest months. But what if I told you that this idealized picture is far from reality? What if you learned that winters in the Roman Empire, even in the heart of the Eternal City, could be so fierce and merciless that even mighty rivers froze and snow covered the usual streets with a thick layer, creating real snowdrifts? The freezing wind was bone-chilling, and the chilly rain was turning the roads into impassable mud. It was during these harsh months that the Romans, these avowed masters of survival and ingenuity, faced a truly formidable challenge. Cold, hunger, and disease were as formidable enemies to them as the barbarian legions on the empire's borders. So how did they manage to cope with such severe frosts when even the rivers froze and the thermometer dropped to unusual values? Could the inhabitants of the city, accustomed to the Mediterranean sun, withstand the elements without access to modern central heating systems, which we take for granted, or to high-tech warm clothes like down jackets and thermal underwear? Are you ready to learn about the most unusual, ingenious, and sometimes seemingly primitive, but surprisingly effective tricks that help the Romans not only survive, but also really thrive in conditions that would seem completely incompatible with their sunny lifestyle? Then don't switch off and stay tuned, because today we will reveal the most incredible, known secrets of Roman survival in the harsh winter, from amazing engineering solutions that were thousands of years ahead of their time, to the simplest but wisest household techniques that still cause admiration and surprise. Forget the primitive hearths that only inefficiently heated a small part of the room, releasing most of the precious heat and acrid smoke directly into the atmosphere. The Romans, known for their genius in engineering, went much further, making a real revolution in heating systems. Imagine not just a stove or fireplace, but a whole, complex and thoughtful engineering system, masterfully hidden under the floor and in the walls, which was able to evenly heat every corner of the house, creating an unprecedented level of comfort for that time. Sounds like modern technology, doesn't it? This is exactly what the Hypocaust was, one of the most impressive and ingenious Roman tricks to combat the cold, which became not just a utilitarian device, but a real symbol of Roman luxury, innovation, and ingenuity. The Hypocaust function was based on a specially designed furnace called a perfernium. It was usually located outside the building or in a separate technical room to prevent smoke and carbon monoxide from entering the interior of residential premises, ensuring safety and cleanliness of the air. Hot air, saturated with heat, and smoke from this furnace were fed through an elaborate system of channels into hollow spaces specially created under the floor. The floor itself, which consisted of massive stone slabs, was raised above the ground on many strong brick pillars or piles, which the Romans called pilamipillae. These columns formed a kind of branched air chamber, or, if you prefer, a maze of channels. Hot air circulated freely through these channels, gradually and evenly heating the stone floor, slabs to a comfortable, pleasantly warm temperature. But Roman engineering didn't stop there. Part of this hot air passing under the floor was also directed to specially designed cavities inside the walls, tubuli muralis, creating an additional wall heating system. Thus, the heat was distributed not only from below, but also vertically, evenly heating the entire room. And then the exhaust air and smoke were released through special ventilation holes in the upper part of the walls, or through chimneys located on the roof. This sophisticated yet elegant system was so efficient and well thought out that it allowed us to maintain not just an acceptable, but a truly comfortable and stable temperature, even in the largest and coldest rooms. We are talking about the spacious halls of patrician villas, luxurious imperial palaces, and of course, grandiose public baths, thermal baths, that could accommodate thousands of people at the same time. Hypocaust not only provided the necessary heat, but also effectively fought dampness, a problem that was a real scourge for health in the cold season, contributing to the development of respiratory diseases, rheumatism, and fungal infections. The rich Romans were able to enjoy the unheard-of luxury of underfloor heating and walls, which was absolutely inaccessible to most of their contemporaries in other civilizations of the world. It is not surprising that the thermal baths with their hypocaust were so incredibly popular. They served not only as a place to cleanse the body, but also as a real shelter from the cold, where you could warm up to the very bones, allowing you to relax and restore strength, making winter days much more tolerable and even pleasant. This technology was so advanced that its principles were used in later eras, and its perfectly preserved traces can still be found in the ruins of Roman cities across Europe, from Britain to North Africa, attesting to the outstanding achievements of Roman engineering. When we think of Roman fashion, images of light, loosely draped fabrics that are perfect for the hot Mediterranean climate usually come to mind, emphasizing the grace and dignity of the wearer. However, when the harsh Roman winter arrived, with its biting winds, sleet, and snow, the clothing of the Romans became not just a style element or a demonstration of social status, but literally a vital means of protection from the biting cold and dank moisture. The Romans, of course, did not have modern high-tech materials such as down jackets, jackets with membrane fabrics, or thermal underwear, but their wardrobe was surprisingly adapted to climatic conditions, demonstrating a strikingly pragmatic and rational approach to fashion that deserves our attention. The togas that we are used to seeing on statues depicting noble Romans were not at all as light and airy as it might seem. In fact, they were most often made of dense, heavy wool, and their size was impressive. They were huge pieces of fabric, reaching up to 6 meters in length and up to 2 meters in width. This massive fabric draped itself very artfully around the body, creating several dense layers. These layers acted as natural and highly effective insulation. They trapped air between the fibers of the fabric, creating air pockets that significantly improved the insulation, helping to retain the body's own heat and preventing it from dissipating. Under the toga, men usually wore wool or linen tunics, which also added layers and, accordingly, warmth, especially if they were worn in several pieces, one on top of the other. Over the toga, or simpler tunic, the Romans, especially in cold weather, wore a palla, a kind of large rectangular cloak or cape, also made of dense wool, which could be wrapped tightly around the body, additionally protecting from the treacherous wind. For protection from the biting wind, snow, and rain, more functional and practical raincoats were actively used. Among them, penula stood out especially, a voluminous raincoat with a hood, which was often made of water-repellent, very tightly woven wool or even leather, which made it possible to effectively remove moisture and keep out the cold. Some penulas were very voluminous and could reach up to the knees or even ankles, completely covering the person and providing maximum protection. Another common option was the lacerna, a lighter cloak that was often worn over the toga for additional but not as heavy protection. Did you know what the Romans wore? Pants? Yes, those very trousers that were considered a barbaric attribute in Rome. How did they justify this barbaric choice in the harsh winters? The answer lies in the next part. Special attention, of course, was paid to the clothing of the Roman legionaries, who were often on harsh winter campaigns throughout the vast empire. From the frosty banks of the Rhine and Danube, where icy winds reigned, to the snow-covered mountains of Britain. Their uniforms were as practical and warm as possible, designed for the heaviest conditions in Slovenia. Wool tunics, sometimes worn in several layers, and yes, those thick trousers, brachii. Although the wearing of trousers was really considered a barbaric custom and was not approved in Rome itself, in the conditions of northern latitudes and military campaigns, they were not suitable for military use. They were vital for the survival of soldiers, protecting them from frostbite. And of course, the famous sagums, heavy, dense woolen cloaks that served not only as outerwear, but also as a warm blanket during bivouacs and overnight stays in the field. Often they were coarse woven, but incredibly warm and durable. Thus, Roman clothing was not only a symbol of citizenship and social status, but also a thoughtful, practical way to survive the cold months, demonstrating a deep understanding of the need for layering, the use of natural insulation materials, and adaptation to external conditions. When we think of ancient Roman cities, especially Rome itself, we often think of majestic forums, grandiose temples, and spacious squares bathed in the sun. However, the reality of everyday life, especially for the majority of the population living in apartment buildings, was quite different. Roman cities were incredibly densely populated, especially in their central areas. The streets were narrow and winding, and the apartment buildings, multi-story structures known as insuls, were closely connected to each other, forming a solid, almost monolithic development. And although such crowding certainly created obvious problems with hygiene, the rapid spread of diseases and terrible fire safety, which we could talk about in a separate video, in the cold season, it unexpectedly played into the hands of residents, creating a completely unique but effective architectural microclimate. Do you want to know how ordinary neighbors helped each other stay warm just by living nearby? Watch this video to the end. Closely spaced buildings, literally pressed together by walls, actually formed a kind of heat island in the middle of urban development. The walls of the houses, touching, significantly reduced the surface area through which heat could escape into the environment, since neighboring buildings acted as natural insulators, creating a buffer zone. Dense buildings also prevented the penetration of cold, biting winds and drafts, which could instantly freeze out homes. In addition, the huge number of fires burning in tens of thousands of insulae in private homes throughout the city. After all, each house needed a fire for cooking and at least some heating, although it dissipated its heat, but together created a general, cumulative microclimate in urban neighborhoods. This microclimate was noticeably warmer than in open areas or in rural areas outside the city. It was a kind of collective heating, although not centralized in the modern sense, but very effective. In addition to the architectural features, the social structure and lifestyle of the Romans themselves contributed to the heat exchange. People naturally gathered together in taverns, the Roman equivalent of pubs or cafes, public places such as famous baths, and the homes of their neighbors and friends. This was due not only to communication, sharing news and entertainment, but also to the simple, urgent need to keep warm. By sharing their body heat, they created a more comfortable indoor temperature. On cold evenings, families and neighbors could huddle around a single hearth or portable roaster, enhancing the mutual heating effect and creating a sense of comfort and community. This forced but very useful crowding was not the most obvious but very effective trick for collective heating, demonstrating how the urban environment could be both a source of problems and, paradoxically, solutions to everyday challenges. When it comes to Roman warmth, it is impossible not to mention their famous thermal baths. But did you know that in addition to the grandiose, man-made bath complexes, the Romans also used natural hot springs with amazing skill, which were considered a real gift from the gods? The Romans were well aware of the value of these gifts of nature and actively exploited them not only for heating their homes and public buildings, but also for improving their health, treating various ailments, and, of course, maintaining the strict hygiene that they so valued. Many Roman settlements, especially in what is now Italy, were strategically established right next to geothermal vents. Their water was not only used for drinking and irrigation of agricultural land, but also through complex systems of special channels and pipes was sent directly to public baths, luxury villas, and even to some heating systems, providing constant and incredibly reliable access to heat and hot water all year round. Cities such as Baiae on the picturesque Campania coast were widely known for their healing thermal waters and turned into real luxury thermal resorts, where people from all over the vast empire flocked to warm up, improve their health, and enjoy their holidays. However, even where nature did not provide the Romans with natural hot springs, they did not lose heart and built their famous baths, huge, monumental complexes that served much more than just baths. They were real social centers, the heart of urban life. These colossal structures were heated using the same complex and efficient hypocaustic system that we discussed earlier, turning into a reliable shelter from the cold. And most surprisingly, these thermal baths were accessible to most segments of the population, although with different levels of luxury and, of course, the cost of visiting. Inside the thermal baths, you could not only bathe in the warm or hot water of various pools, but also spend many hours in the calidarium, a hot room with saturated steam where the pores open, laconica, a dry steam room similar to a sauna, or tepidaria, a warm room designed to gradually get used to the high temperature or for recreation. It was not just a place to maintain hygiene, but a kind of universal social club where you could meet friends and business partners, read in the extensive libraries located at the thermal baths, do various physical exercises in the palestra, and most importantly, warm up to the very bones, literally feeling the warmth penetrate into every cell bodies. The Romans, soaking in hot water and enjoying a relaxing steam bath, were able to fully relax and recuperate from the hard struggle against the winter cold and adversity. The baths were so important to Roman daily life and social well-being that their construction and maintenance were often funded by the state or by wealthy, generous citizens who sought to earn popularity. Thus, the baths became an integral part of the city's infrastructure and a vital tool for fighting the cold in winter, demonstrating the amazing care of the Romans for the well-being of their citizens. In cold weather, the human body instinctively, without any scientific knowledge, needs much more energy to maintain its stable internal temperature. The Romans, without modern knowledge of calories, metabolism, or nutrients, intuitively understood this need through trial and error and adapted their diets accordingly to provide themselves with the necessary fuel during the harsh winter months. And believe me, their culinary tricks were no less inventive than their engineering solutions. Do you want to know what food helped the Romans keep warm better than the warmest modern blanket? Watch this video until the very end to reveal all the secrets. Cereals such as wheat and barley were an absolute and irreplaceable basis for the diet of almost all segments of the population. They were used to make not only traditional bread, which was on the table every day, but also thick, rich porridges, pulse, a kind of ancestor of modern polenta or pudding. The pulse was incredibly nutritious, easily absorbed by the body, and gave a long feeling of satiety. Also popular were various chowders and soups made from cereals and legumes, which were not only nutritious, but also warming. These meals, rich in complex carbohydrates, provided a long and stable release of the energy needed to maintain body heat throughout the day, especially during physical labor. A large number of legumes, peas, lentils, and beans were generously added to the food. They were an excellent source of plant-based protein and fiber, providing not only a long feeling of fullness, but also supporting digestion, which was important for health. Of course, a variety of meat dishes were available to the rich Romans, which provided plenty of animal protein and fat, so necessary in cold weather for energy production. But even for ordinary people in winter, seasonal long-term vegetables such as cabbage, onions, garlic, as well as root vegetables such as turnips and carrots were available. If possible, dried meat, salted fish, or lard were prepared, which was a valuable source of fat and protein in conditions of limited access to fresh products. As for drinks, the most common practice was to consume diluted wine. It was not only a matter of taste, but also of hygiene, as wine made the water safer. In the cold season, the wine could be drunk less diluted than in summer in order to get more warming effect. And sometimes the wine was even heated, vinum conditum, adding aromatic spices such as pepper, cinnamon, cloves, or honey. Such warming drinks helped to feel warmer from the inside, creating a pleasant feeling of warmth spreading through the body. The Romans also drank pasca, an acidic drink made from water and vinegar that was not only refreshing, but also, thanks to the acidity of the vinegar, helped kill some of the bacteria in the water, which was especially important in conditions of poor hygiene. Thus, food and drinks were not just a source of food and survival, but also an important element of fuel for the body in the fight against the cold, as well as a means to improve mood and create comfort on chilly winter evenings. For the rich Romans, the desire for comfort, refined pleasures, and beauty was not limited to heating their living quarters and thermal baths. They also found incredibly inventive ways to keep their exotic plants safe and sound during the winter cold, and at the same time create real oases of warmth and greenery right in their villas, demonstrating amazing foresight and engineering talent. If you thought that greenhouses were an invention of much later European times, you will be amazed to learn that the Romans built their counterparts long before that. You won't believe when the first greenhouses actually appeared. It was long before Europeans even thought about them. The Romans created so-called greenhouses or winter greenhouses, known at the time as heliocamini, heliocaminus, solar oven, or heliocum rooms, which literally means sunrooms. These structures have been specially designed to grow cold-sensitive plants such as citrus fruits, grapes, and rare flowers, even in the coldest months of the year. A key element of these structures were large transparent windows made of thin plates of mica, lapis specularis, a mineral that was transparent enough to let in the sunlight needed for photosynthesis, but at the same time effectively retain heat inside the room, creating a favorable and stable microclimate for plants. In rare cases, for the most luxurious villas, even primitive, but already existing glass was used. Moreover, some of these structures could be equipped with mini Hippocausts, smaller and simplified versions of the main heating system, which provided additional heating. Or they used portable braziers, foculuses, with burning coals which were placed inside the greenhouse on particularly cold days, providing additional heat. This was not just a whim or a display of untold wealth, it was a very practical solution, allowing the nobility to have fresh vegetables, fruits, and even exotic flowers that usually did not grow in the local climate, even in winter, providing variety on the table and aesthetic enjoyment. Heated indoor gardens, or viridariums, which were often arranged in rich city houses and country villas, also created a kind of oasis of warmth and greenery. These cozy corners served as an ideal place to escape the winter cold and enjoy the beauty of nature, which apparently completely ignored seasonal restrictions. This trick not only demonstrates how far Roman engineering thought went in its quest for comfort and satisfaction of its needs, but also highlights their deep love of nature, art, and a sophisticated lifestyle, which manifested itself in even the most seemingly utilitarian solutions. At first glance, furniture is just interior items. However, even in the arrangement of their homes, the Romans showed an implicit but effective trick aimed at preserving heat and creating a cozy atmosphere during the cold months. In rich homes and villas, heavy, dense fabrics were used for upholstery, elegant curtains separating the rooms, and of course, bedspreads. Wool or linen carpets and mats, tappets, often decorated with intricate patterns, not only served as a decorative element, but also covered cold stone or mosaic floors, creating an additional layer of insulation and preventing heat loss through the floor. Wooden furniture, although not as luxurious and prestigious as marble, was much warmer to the touch, which was especially valuable in winter. For additional insulation of their lodges, lectuces, and seats, the Romans actively used soft pillows, thick wool blankets, lacernae, and most importantly, fur skins of various animals. These skins not only gave the interior comfort, but also served as an excellent natural insulator, providing warmth and softness. In the homes of wealthy citizens, in addition to hippocausts, fireplaces, foci, could be equipped or portable braziers, although not everywhere, but created a cozy atmosphere and a source of direct heat in the main rooms. The architectural layout of the houses also played an important role. The Romans thought through the arrangement of windows. There were fewer on the north side to minimize heat loss from cold winds, and much more on the south side to maximize the use of solar heat during the day. Rooms designed for daytime use were often located in such a way as to receive maximum sunlight and heat, reducing heat loss at night. In addition, the courtyards, atriums, and peristyles, although open from above, could serve as a buffer zone in the cold season, protecting living spaces from direct exposure to the elements. All these seemingly small details combine to create a warmer and more comfortable living environment in winter. Regardless of the era and technological progress, one of the easiest, most affordable, and versatile ways to keep warm has always been and remains movement. The Romans, whether they were seasoned legionnaires on long campaigns or ordinary city dwellers, were well aware of this and actively engaged in physical labor and exercise, which naturally generated heat in the body. For soldiers serving in the cold provinces or making winter marches, physical activity was not just a way to keep fit, but a vital necessity. Multi-kilometer marches with a full layout, the construction of fortified camps, digging trenches, harvesting firewood. All this required enormous physical effort and led to intense heat generation. Even while resting in the camp, soldiers could engage in drill or exercises to avoid freezing. In peacetime, in urban settings, physical labor was also ubiquitous, from building buildings and roads to agricultural work in the fields around cities. Most of the population was engaged in manual labor, which in itself served as an excellent way to maintain heat. Even in recreational areas such as the thermal baths, the Romans often devoted time to physical exercise in addition to bathing. In the palaestra, special courtyards for training, you could see people engaged in discus throwing, wrestling, various ball games, or just running. All these activities contributed to warming up the body and improving blood circulation. Even simple daily activities, such as long walks around the city, climbing the many stairs of Insula, or working from home, helped maintain a sufficient level of activity. In the absence of central heating, exercise was the best, most natural, and generally available way to get your blood circulating faster, speed up your metabolism, and therefore keep you warm. It wasn't so much a trick as it was common sense and a natural instinct for survival. But it was thanks to this constant activity that many Romans were able to endure the cold without serious consequences for their health while remaining hardy and efficient. When the cold winter came, driving through the streets of Rome became not only uncomfortable, but also quite unpleasant. The open chariots, though fast, were no protection at all from the biting wind, snow, or rain. For the noble and rich Romans, there was a very comfortable way to stay warm during winter trips around the city and beyond. These were closed palanquins and stretchers, lectica. These vehicles were a kind of closed cabs or couches that were carried on the shoulders of specially trained slave porters, lexicarians. The palanquins were spacious enough to accommodate one or two people, allowing them to sit or even lie down. They could be equipped with thick, heavy curtains made of wool or other fabrics that effectively protected from drafts and prying eyes. In some cases, especially luxury palanquins, they even had windows made of thin mica plates, lapis specularis, or even more rare, of primitive glass, which allowed them to observe the outside world while remaining warm. Inside such a palanquin, you could lay warm wool blankets, soft pillows, and even fur skins, creating an additional layer of insulation and comfort. In particularly cold weather or during long trips, portable braziers, foculuses, with hot coals could be placed inside the palanquin. These small but efficient heat sources created a small but cozy and warm microclimate inside the palanquin, allowing the noble Romans to stay warm even on the coldest days. This method of transportation was, of course, accessible only to a very few, the wealthiest and most influential strata of society, since it required numerous slave porters and was quite expensive. However, this trick clearly shows how inventive the Romans were in their pursuit of personal comfort and how much they valued the ability to avoid the inconvenience of weather conditions, even if it required significant resources. This may seem unusual for modern humans, but even animals played a role in Roman heating tricks, not only for the rich, but also for ordinary people. Of course, we are not talking about sleeping with horses in a bed in an aristocratic house, but the heat from domestic animals, especially in peasant houses and villas, where cattle were often kept in close proximity to living quarters, or even under the same roof, was an essential and unconscious source of heat. On farms and in rural homes where there were no hippocausts, animals such as sheep, goats, cows, and pigs generated significant amounts of heat. Their stalls and paddocks were often located next to the living rooms, and sometimes adjacent to them, creating a kind of natural living radiator. Heat from livestock bodies, their breath, and even waste products, such as manure, which also released heat when decomposed, helped to warm adjacent rooms, especially on cold nights. This was especially true for the poorer segments of the population, who did not have other sources of heating. In addition to live heat, the Romans actively used animal products to preserve heat. Animal skins, sheep, goat, bear, wolf, were extremely popular. They were used as warm blankets, blankets for beds and couches, bedding for cold stone benches, and even as elements of clothing. Wool and fur have excellent insulation properties. They trap air between the fibers, creating a warm layer that effectively retains body heat. This made them indispensable for protection from the cold, especially away from urban comfort and hypocausts. Fur products could be either rough and practical for plebeians and soldiers, or luxurious and refined for the nobility. This simple but effective trick demonstrates the pragmatism of the Romans, who used all the resources available to them, be it natural phenomena, engineering solutions, or gifts of the animal world, to survive in harsh conditions. They showed an amazing intelligence and ability to adapt to any challenges, which certainly contributed to their dominance in the ancient world. We took a trip to the wintry ancient Rome and learned that this empire faced a harsh cold that required ingenuity. The Romans developed an arsenal of tricks to stay warm, from advanced systems such as Hypocaust to the use of natural heat sources. Adapting clothing and nutrition, every aspect of life has been adapted to deal with frost. We learned about luxury greenhouses, the importance of home comfort, the importance of physical activity, and the role of animals in their skins. Even the rich Romans invented closed palanquins for warmth. These secrets reveal the amazing adaptability of the Romans, showing how they brought rationality and ingenuity to everyday life. It was a survival lesson that is still relevant today. I hope that the story of Roman tricks helped you to take a fresh look at this civilization. If you liked it, please subscribe and like it. What other secrets of history are you interested in? Share in the comments.